The immigration officers slammed Keoma Okafor against the cold airport wall, their hands pinning her arms so hard she felt her bones might crack. "Let me go! I'm innocent! You've got it all wrong!" Her scream echoed through Incheon Airport's restricted corridor. Travelers stopped and stared. Security cameras captured everything. One officer reached for handcuffs, his grip loosening for just a second as he fumbled with the metal restraints. Keoma didn't think. She ran. Her hair whipped behind her as she sprinted through the terminal, lungs burning, heart hammering against her ribs. She had no plan, no destination, just pure animal desperation, and 6 hours left before they put her on a plane and erased everything she'd spent 2 years building. That's when she saw him. A Korean man in an all-black suit that screamed money and danger, flanked by a dozen men who looked like they could snap necks without breaking a sweat. Everything about him radiated lethal power, the sharp jaw, the cold eyes, the way everyone in the terminal seemed to instinctively move out of his path. But Keoma didn't have time to think about consequences. She crashed into him, grabbed his face with both hands, and kissed him. For the first time in 20 years, Jang Tae-won felt blood rush down through his body. Her lips were soft, desperate, trembling against his. She kissed him like she was drowning and he was air, messy, graceless, her hands shaking as they fisted in his suit collar, pulling him down to her. Tae-won froze. His mind screamed danger even as his body responded in ways he'd trained himself to suppress for a decade. Heat, want, need. He was throbbing painfully, and he wanted to kill her for it. His hands found her waist. Whether to push her away or pull her closer, he couldn't tell. His fingers gripped the fabric of her shirt, felt her warmth, her fear, her desperation bleeding into him. For 20 years, he'd trained himself to be dead below the waist, cold, controlled, safe. This stranger just shattered all of his defenses with one kiss. "Please," she whispered against his lips, breathless and terrified. "Pretend you're my husband, just for 5 minutes. Please, I'm begging you." She felt his body change, muscles tensing in a way that should have scared her, and she realized with delayed horror what she had just done. She had kissed a complete stranger. She pulled back, gasping, her innocent eyes meeting his. She saw the storm raging in Jang Tae-won's eyes, half desire, dark and hungry, half rage, cold and lethal. Something that said men didn't touch the most powerful man in Seoul without permission, and women certainly didn't kiss him without consequences. Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. It was a mistake." She tried to step back. His hand locked around her wrist like iron. He pulled her back, his voice soft and deadly as thumb traced one slow circle on the inside of her wrist, right over her pulse, frantic, hammering, giving her away entirely. Keoma felt the shiver move through her before she could stop it. Yes, it was. His eyes bored into hers, promising violence. "And I'm going to make certain it's the worst one you've ever made." Keoma was about to pull away in fear when he did something unexpected. Tae-won smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just found something interesting to play with. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her against firmly, inescapable. "You wanted a husband?" His laugh was low, dangerous against her ear. "Congratulations, wife. You just married the devil." His arm locked around her waist like an iron band, pulling her against him. Possessive, claiming, absolute. The immigration officers skidded to a stop 3 feet away. They bowed deeply. They apologized as they reached for their handcuffs. "Sir, so sorry for this. This woman is—" "My wife," Tae-won interrupted, his voice dropping to a register that made grown men flinch. The shift was subtle, deadly. The officers swallowed. He stepped closer, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve with unhurried precision. "Now," he said softly, eyes devoid of warmth, "you will explain to me why you thought it was wise to lay your hands on my wife." A beat. "And you will choose your next words very carefully." Now you're probably wondering, how did a Nigerian immigrant working 4 jobs to save her mother's life end up as the possession of Seoul's most dangerous man? That story starts with coffee, and a betrayal that cut deeper than any blade. But if you want to see what happens when you accidentally marry a mafia boss who plans to punish you for breaking his control while claiming you as his, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this isn't a sweet romance. This is a mafia king who believes she's his to break and his to protect. A fake marriage turning dangerously obsessive, desire that crosses every line, and a man who doesn't forgive but refuses to let her go. Comment "Married to the Devil" if you're ready for Taewon's revenge. Like this video if You Just Married the Devil gave you chills. Turn on notifications, because what he does next changes everything. Now, let's rewind. 72 hours earlier, Gangnam Cafe. Kyoma's hands wouldn't stop shaking around the wedding invitation. The expensive cardstock felt like it was burning her fingers. Gold-embossed lettering. A photo of her boyfriend of 2 years, Park Min-ho and Song Ji-woo, looking perfect together. "I don't understand." Her voice cracked, tears already streaming down her face. "Min-ho, we've been together for 2 years. You said you loved me. You said, love?" Min-ho looked up from his coffee with something like amusement. "Kyoma, come on. You're a smart woman. Surely you didn't actually believe—" "Believe what?" She could barely breathe. "That you meant any of it?" He sighed, like she was being difficult. Like she was the problem. "Let me ask you something." He leaned back, completely comfortable. "What exactly did you think I was going to do with a woman like you?" The words hit like a slap. "A woman like me," she repeated slowly. "Yes." He gestured at her casually. "A Nigerian woman. A black woman. In Korea." He said it like it explained everything. "How did you think I'd introduce you to my family? Marry you? Build a life with you here? It's just not culturally appropriate." "You brought me here." Her voice rose, drawing stares from other customers. "You recruited me from Lagos. You said—" "I said what I needed to say to get you here." He was so calm, so cold. "Because I needed you, Kyoma. Not for love, for business. I mean, isn't that obvious enough now?" Her stomach dropped. "See, Korean companies have been trying to break into African markets. It's nearly impossible." He warmed to his explanation, like he was proud of it. The cultural barriers, the trust issues, the historical baggage. But you? His smile was cruel. You were perfect. An educated, beautiful Nigerian woman with a perfect traditional background who spoke English and Igbo fluently. Kyoma felt the world tilting. "You were my golden ticket," Min-ho continued. "Every boardroom I walked into with you by my side, every contract presentation where you smiled and vouched for my integrity, every board I introduced you to—" He paused. "Do you know how much money you made for the company? Your presence alone opened doors I could never have touched." "You used me." The words came out as a whisper. "You used me to scam my own people." "Scam is such an ugly word. I prefer strategic market penetration." He shrugged. "Black companies trust black faces. It's basic psychology. You were the face that made them trust me, and it worked beautifully." He pulled out the envelope, slid it across the table with the wedding invitation. "Wellington Media is now operational in 6 African countries, with projected revenue of, well, let's just say you were a very profitable investment." His smile widened. "Ji-woo is who I should have been pursuing all along. She's Korean, her father is a judge. Her family knows my family. She fits. And I don't." Kyoma's voice was hollow. He looked at her as though she was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever seen. "Come on, Kyoma. We both know the answer to that." Something inside Kyoma cracked open. She'd spent 2 years in love with this man, 2 years trusting him, 2 years helping him, introducing him to her family, vouching for his character to her people. And he'd used her face, her name, her connections to build his empire, then discarded her. "I'm telling them," she said quietly. Min-ho's smile faltered. "What?" "Every company, every contract." Her voice grew stronger. "The Adeyemi Group, the Okonkwo Foundation, Ghana International, all of them. I'm going to visit their offices here in Korea. I'll tell them exactly what you did, how you used me, how you manipulated them." "You won't," he started. "I'll destroy everything you built with my face." She stood, her chair scraping back. "You think they wouldn't immediately pull out after hearing how you exploited a fellow black woman? I'll make sure every single deal falls apart. Sit down." Minho's voice went cold. Something in his tone made her pause. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked calculating. "You won't get the chance," he said softly, threatening. "I'll make sure of it." Keoma looked him right in the eye. "Watch me." But Keoma had severely underestimated how far Minho could go, and she found out the hard way 48 hours later. Keoma was buttoning her work blouse when the pounding started. "Immigration! Open this door now!" Her heart stopped. 5 officers filled her doorway, stone-faced and official. "Keoma Okafor, you're under arrest for visa fraud and falsifying immigration documents." "What? No, I have 18 months left," she explained. "Your work authorization was revoked 3 months ago." The lead officer held up papers. "You've been in Korea illegally since then. Come with us. Now." "That's impossible. I never received—" Hands grabbed her. She was dragged from her apartment in her work clothes. No phone, no time, neighbors staring. At the detention center, they showed her the evidence. Visa revoked, employer fraud, her work authorization canceled, falsified documents. A complaint filed by Park Min-ho claiming she'd forged his signature on her visa extension, that she'd been working illegally, that she'd used him to commit immigration fraud. Every document looked official. Every signature looked real. But it was all lies. Keoma sat in that cold detention room, handcuffed to a table, and understood. Min-ho hadn't just dumped her. He'd systematically destroyed any chance she had of fighting back. "You're being deported in 6 hours, the officer told her. "We're processing you now, then you'll be escorted to your gate. Please, I need to make a call. I need a lawyer," she begged. "You had weeks to get a lawyer. Should have thought of that before you committed fraud." "I didn't commit fraud. Park Min-ho forged those documents," she tried to explain. "Mr. Park is a respected director with no criminal record. You're a foreign national with revoked authorization." The officer's expression was stone. "Who do you think we're going to believe?" The door slammed shut. Keoma dropped her head into her hands. Her heart sank. This was all Min-ho's doing. How could he go this far to betray her? He knew how much she needed to work here to raise enough money for her mother's surgery. She had no money for a lawyer. No time to prove Min-ho forged the documents. No way out. Her thoughts raced back to her sick mother back in Nigeria. Her heart shattered. She couldn't leave Korea now. She had barely made enough money for the first treatment. She needed about 1 more year, half if she worked twice as hard. Unless a desperate thought struck her. Marriage to a Korean citizen could pause deportation proceedings. It was a long shot, an insane long shot, but it was all she had. She just needed to find a Korean man willing to claim her as his wife in the next... She checked the clock. 5 hours and 43 minutes. But she couldn't leave this place. 5 hours later, they transported her to Incheon Airport and dragged her through the terminal like a criminal. Keoma's mind raced desperately. She thought about her sick mother lying helplessly on the hospital bed the last time she'd seen her. How she'd begged for treatments, and the doctors had insisted that she'd have to pay a hefty deposit first. Such an outrageous amount that would take her almost 10 years to work for back in Nigeria. She began to struggle harder. She couldn't leave like this. A lot was riding on her staying in this country. She thought about her options as she struggled. There was only one: marriage. Or at least a fabricated marriage to a Korean citizen could pause this. This was impossible. She had no money, no connections, no... They passed through a security checkpoint into the VIP section. Luxury lounges, first-class travelers, wealthy businessmen in suits that cost more than her entire year's rent. That's when she saw him. The man in the black suit. Dangerous. Powerful. She didn't have time to think about consequences. She crashed into him, grabbed his face with both hands, and kissed him. Hard. Desperate. Like her life depended on it. Because it did. For the first time in 20 years, Jang Tae-won felt blood rush down through his body. His entire world narrowed to the feeling of soft lips against his, small hands fisted in his expensive suit collar, the scent of cocoa butter and fear and something floral he couldn't name. And then, hell. He was hard. throbbing, aching, his body responding in ways he'd trained himself to suppress for a decade. Taewon had learned to stay away from women at all costs. His father had beaten that lesson into him before he was 12. Women are weaknesses. In our world, weaknesses get you killed. He'd seen it firsthand. Had done it firsthand, used other men's wives, girlfriends, fiancés as leverage, as weapons, as the quickest path to destruction. He'd perfected the art of cold indifference. No woman had stirred anything in him since... until now. Until this wild-eyed African woman with tears streaming down her face shattered every defense he'd spent 20 years building, with nothing but a desperate kiss. Taewon's hands moved instinctively to her waist. Whether to steady her or push her away, he didn't know. His mind screamed danger while his body screamed something else entirely. She pulled back, gasping, her dark eyes meeting his with raw terror and desperate hope. "Please," she whispered, her accent thick and beautiful and completely foreign to his world. "Pretend you're my husband. Just for 5 minutes. Please." Taewon's first coherent thought, "I'm going to kill her for this." His second thought died as he saw them. 3 immigration officers running toward them, radios crackling, faces flushed with exertion and authority. And just like that, Taewon was 12 years old again, watching his father being dragged away in handcuffs while his mother screamed. Watching powerless men in uniforms destroy his family with paperwork and procedure and the cold machinery of the law. Something dark and old twisted in his chest. He looked down at the trembling woman still clutching his suit. "You wanted a husband?" he said softly, dangerously, his lips curving into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Congratulations, wife. You just married the devil." His arm locked around her waist like an iron band, pulling her against him. Possessive, claiming, absolute. The immigration officers skidded to a stop 3 feet away. They bowed deeply. They apologized as they reached for their handcuffs. "Sir, so sorry for this. This woman is my wife," Taewon interrupted, his voice dropping to a register that made grown men flinch. The shift was subtle, deadly. The officers swallowed. He stepped closer, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve with unhurried precision. "Now," he said softly, eyes devoid of warmth, "you will explain to me why you thought it was wise to lay your hands on my wife." A beat. "And you will choose your next words very carefully." His words landed like bombs. His arm tightened around Kyoma's waist. She felt the possessive grip, the raw power in his body. Officer Kim froze. "Your wife? Hard of hearing?" "Hard." Taewon looked down at Kyoma with perfectly crafted concern. "Jagya, are you all right?" The endearment rolled off his tongue like honey. Kyoma could only nod, her heart hammering. But she was watching him now. Really watching. The way he stood. The cold authority. The danger barely leashed beneath expensive fabric. Something stirred low in her belly. Taewon's attention snapped back to the officers. "Someone explain why my wife just got dragged through my airport like a common thief," he demanded. "Your airport?" Officer Kim's voice cracked. "Chairman Jang Taewon." He didn't offer his hand. "I own 40% of Incheon Logistics, which means 40% of your security contracts." His smile was all teeth. "Want to guess how I feel about my security teams not informing me that immigration was assaulting Korean citizens' spouses?" The officers' faces drained of color. They knew that name, Jang Taewon, the most influential man in Seoul. Kyoma felt her pulse quicken. She'd kissed someone important, someone dangerous. "Mr. Jang, we had no record," they began. "So your database is shit." He said it casually, like discussing the weather. Shocker. Despite everything, despite her terror, Kyoma felt her lips twitch. "Let me guess." Taewon tilted his head. "Lowest bidder design? Maintained by underpaid civil servants? And you're surprised it has gaps?" Officer Kim opened his mouth, closed it. "That's what I thought." Taewon's thumb traced circles on Kyoma's hip. The gesture looked comforting, felt possessive. "Now, my wife has marks on her wrists. She's terrified. And I'm wondering..." His smile widened dangerously. Should I call my lawyer? Or just call Director Choi? We usually have golf every Tuesday. Keoma watched him work, fascinated despite herself. He wasn't threatening. Not really, just stating facts. But every word made the officers more terrified. If we'd known, they started again. But you didn't check. His voice dropped to silk and steel. Just grabbed a woman and slapped on handcuffs. So help me out. Incompetence or malice? There was a complaint. Director Park Min-ho alleged. Park Min-ho? Something dark flickered in his eyes, and he chuckled lightly. The sound made Keoma shudder. The same Park Min-ho currently under investigation for embezzlement? He glanced at his phone. That one? How did he know that? Keoma stared at him, her fear mixing with something else, something hot and dangerous. Remove the handcuffs, Taiwan said quietly. Now. Officer Kim fumbled with his keys. The metal fell away. Taiwan inspected her wrists, his touch surprisingly gentle. Better. He looked up at the officers. Update your records. Korean citizen spouse. Unless... He smiled. You'd prefer I file a formal complaint about today? No, sir. Good choice. He guided Keoma toward the exit, hand possessive on her waist. If this incident gets discussed outside official channels, he glanced back, I'll take it very personally. His smile promised consequences. They left 5 officers standing frozen. Behind them, they muttered, That was Jung Tae-won. Do you know what he does to people? We're fucked. Tae-won guided her out of the airport with his hand on her lower back, possessive, commanding, impossible to resist. And Keoma found herself relying on that hand, on him. The backseat of the Bentley swallowed them whole, black leather, climate-controlled silence, the kind of quiet that had nothing to prove. Keoma pressed herself against the door, arms wrapped around herself, trying to occupy as little space as possible. Like, if she made herself small enough, the last 3 hours might retroactively make sense. Tae-won sat beside her, one leg crossed over the other, phone already at his ear, speaking rapid Korean, making orders in a voice so quiet it was almost worse than shouting, completely, insufferably unbothered. She stole a glance at him, the sharp profile, the precise, unhurried authority in every syllable. Whoever was on the other end sounded like a person carefully choosing every word they sent back. She watched the way he listened, still, controlled, a faint tension in his jaw that was the only indication he was doing anything at all. Dangerous. Every instinct she had whispered. Something else whispered something different. She looked away, but her mind pulled her back. Back to the kiss. Back to the way his hands had found her waist before he'd even made a decision about it. The warmth of it. The grip that was supposed to push her away and didn't. She'd felt it move through her whole body like something recognizing something. Heat pooled low in her belly. She pressed her fingers briefly to her lips. "Third time," he said. She startled. Tae-won still hadn't looked up from his phone. "Sorry?" she said, confused. "You've touched your lips 3 times since we got in the car." He scrolled through something. "I'm choosing to be flattered rather than concerned." Heat crawled up her neck immediately. "I wasn't... That's not what..." Twice in the airport. Once just now. He glanced at her sideways, something dangerous and amused living in the corner of his expression. "I'm not judging. It was a good kiss." "You kissed me back." She tried to defend. "You started it. That was survival," she said. He returned to his phone. "Is that what they're calling it now?" Keoma turned sharply to the window. She pressed her fingers to the cold glass and told herself she was not going to touch her lips again. The car moved smoothly through evening traffic. Seoul poured past the tinted windows, bright and indifferent. She heard him end one call and immediately begin another, different tone this time, shorter, a name she didn't catch, and 3 sentences that made whoever was receiving them very quiet, very fast. She watched his reflection in the glass. The authority of him was almost physical, not performed, not loud, just present, like gravity, like he'd been the most powerful thing in every room he'd ever walked into and had simply stopped noticing it. She found it deeply, stupidly attractive. "Stop," she told herself. "You kissed a stranger 40 minutes ago. Get a grip." Taewon's eyes stayed on his phone, but his awareness of her did not move an inch. He'd been briefed the moment the door closed. His men were always efficient. 30 seconds of quiet Korean. The relevant facts, delivered cleanly. She'd come from Lagos a year ago. Not for opportunity, for a man who'd been building his exit strategy before she'd even unpacked. She'd been working 4 jobs since, sending money home every month, her mother, surgery. The kind of cost that takes years to build toward, nearly within reach. And Min-ho had dismantled it with a forged signature on a Tuesday. Something had moved in Taewon's chest at that. A small unwanted shift, a locked door rattling once. He'd controlled his expression. He always controlled his expression. But he'd looked at her then. The braids, the work blouse she'd been dragged out of her apartment in, the marks still faint on her wrists, and felt something he had no framework for anymore. She was real in a way that was making him uncomfortable. Every woman who had ever tried to get close to him had felt like a transaction wrapped in warmth. He'd identified each one in under 30 seconds and filed them away accordingly. But this woman had kissed him while running for her life, with no strategy and no angle and no idea who he was, and he'd felt it travel through 20 years of very deliberate insulation like it wasn't there at all. That was the problem. He looked at her now, profile to the window, deliberately not looking at him. "You're doing it again," he said. "I'm looking out the window. You're looking at my reflection in the window." He said it like a correction, not an accusation. "There's a distinction." She opened her mouth, closed it. The denial died before it formed because he was right and they both knew it. She turned to face him instead, arms crossed. "Are you always like this? Like what? Like..." She gestured vaguely at all of him. "This." He considered that genuinely. "Yes. That must be exhausting for everyone around you." She looked at him with something that wanted to be irritation but kept slipping into something else. Taewon held her gaze. "And are you always this ungrateful to people who save your ass from being thrown out of the country? That must be more exhausting for the people around, don't you think?" He shot back. She froze. "I'm sorry," she muttered. "But why did you do it?" she asked. He shrugged in response without looking at her. "You don't even know me." The words came out louder than she intended, cracked at the edges. "You don't know anything about me. You had no reason to do any of that back there. Those officers, the documents, Why would you just—" "You're right," he said. She stopped. He finally lowered his phone and looked at her. "I don't know you," he said. "And yet—" His eyes moved over her face, steady and unhurried. "Here you are. In my car, not on a plane to Lagos, wrists no longer in handcuffs." A pause. "You're welcome, by the way." She opened her mouth. "Since we're tallying what's happened today," he continued, his tone shifting into something dangerously pleasant, "I was kissed without my consent by a complete stranger in my own airport. I said I was sorry. I'm not finished." He tilted his head. "I then lied to government officers, compromised a business relationship with a director I've spent 3 years cultivating. Called in 2 favors I was saving for considerably more important situations, and arranged for a woman I have known for," he checked his watch, "97 minutes to stay in my home." He looked at her. "And you're upset." Kiyoma's mouth closed. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it and straightened slightly. "We're making a stop," he told the driver. Before she could ask, the car eased to the curb outside a restaurant with no sign on the door. The kind of place that had decided long ago it didn't need one. Taewon buttoned his jacket and went out. She blinked as she watched him cross the car. He knocked once on the glass. She lowered it. He leaned against the car, one hand braced on the roof, looking at her with that expression she still didn't have a name for. "Get comfortable. Kwan will take you to the estate." She stared at him. "I'm sorry. What?" "My driver, Kwan." He gestured toward the front seat. "He knows the address." Where are you going?" "I have things to finish." He said it simply, like this was obvious, like she was already caught up. You're leaving me in a car with a stranger going to a place I've never been. You kissed a stranger an hour ago and asked him to marry you. His eyes were steady on hers. Your threshold for strangers seems quite flexible. She breathed in through her nose. That is not the same thing. Isn't it? Not a question. He pushed off the car, adjusted his cuff. Unless you have other plans for tonight? Other arrangements that will make our very authentic, completely legitimate marriage more convincing? He tilted his head. Because I'm open to suggestions. You're the one who wanted a husband. She had nothing to say to that. His mouth curved. Just slightly. Just enough. I'll be home later. He said it like it was a thing he said, like she was a thing he came home to. Don't go through my things. I wasn't going to, but he was already walking away, back toward the restaurant. The estate appeared slowly, the way significant things did. The city fell away. Then the main road. Then gates opened onto a driveway lined with trees old enough to have lived through the Joseon dynasty, and Keoma gave up pretending she wasn't pressed against the window. Then the house. She'd prepared herself. She'd seen the suit, the car, the airport. She'd understood intellectually that this was a wealthy man, but intellectual understanding and this were not the same thing. Glass and dark stone. Severe, architectural lines that felt more intimidating than anything ornate ever could. A wall of windows facing a private garden lit warm and gold in the dark. She felt very, very small. Ms. Shin met her at the door. Efficient. Unreadable. Mrs. Zhang? Seamless. Administrative. This way. Keoma followed through an entrance hall that absorbed sound completely. Original artwork. Floors she was almost afraid to walk on. The suffocating silence of a place that had never had to try. Her room was on the second floor. She stood in the center of it after Ms. Shin left. The bed, the windows, Seoul spread below like it had been arranged for viewing purposes. She sat on the edge of the bed, stood back up, paced. Then she picked up the phone Ms. Shin had left and opened a browser. Zhang Taewon, extensive, immediate. Chairman, Zhang Industries. Controlling shareholder. Estimated net worth. She stopped at the number. Read it twice. Rumored ties to crime organized networks. 32 government investigations in 5 years, none resulting in charges. She stopped on a photograph. Him, at some black tie event. That face, sharp and cold and precise. The caption, Zhang Taewon, 32, whose family has controlled significant portions of Seoul's political and economic infrastructure for 3 generations. 32, 34 investigations, 0 charges. She put the phone face down. A man like that, a man who had immigration directors handing over documents at restaurant doors, whose name made officers go pale mid-sentence, was not a man you accidentally ended up indebted to. She crossed to the window. Seoul glittered below, enormous and indifferent. What if the verification failed? What if everything he'd arranged unraveled by morning and they sent her back anyway? Her mother was still in that hospital bed, still waiting, still. Now what if it didn't fail? He had still promised to make it the worst decision of her life. She was doomed both ways. This man was dangerous. Genuinely, documentably, 34 investigations and no charges dangerous. He had information he shouldn't have. He had a director of immigration in his back pocket behind a golf handicap. He had 4 words and a smile that made grown men nervous. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass, and underneath all of that, quieter, more persistent. The way his hands had found her waist before he'd made any decision about it. The warmth of his breath against her ear. The way he'd defended her in front of the officers. He wasn't what she'd grabbed in that terminal. She wasn't sure yet what he was. She touched her lips without realizing. Caught herself. Dropped her hand. Stop, she told herself. You've known him for 3 hours. Stop. But the feeling didn't listen. It sat in her chest, warm and inconvenient and completely uninterested in being reasonable. Outside, Seoul kept glittering, and she watched until she saw another black Bentley pull up. Her breath caught. He was home. She watched him step out. Jacket gone, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie loosened. Even from this distance, she could see something coiled in the way he moved. Something dangerous. She stepped back from the window. Minutes later, a knock. Ms. Shin. The chairman would like to see you in his study. The study was all dark wood and shadows and windows that made Seoul look small. Taewon stood at the bar with his back to her, pouring amber liquid into crystal. White shirt, rolled sleeves. Everything about his posture screamed controlled violence. He didn't turn when she entered. "Close the door," he said, his voice like ice. She did. The door was so heavy that the click echoed like a gunshot. He took a slow sip. The silence stretched so long her palms started sweating. How did it go? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Is the immigration thing handled?" "Yes," he said. One word. Cold. Final. "What?" she asked. Relief tried to surface, but his tone killed it. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he replied. He still hadn't turned around. She swallowed. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't." He set the glass down. The sound made her flinch. "You should be worrying about other things right now." Ice slid down her spine. "What do you mean?" He finally turned. The look in his eyes made her breath stop. Cold. Lethal. The eyes of the man who'd whispered against her ear at the airport. "You just married the devil." "Do you remember what I told you?" His voice was quiet. Too quiet. "At the airport. After you pulled that stunt." She nodded. Couldn't speak. "Say it." He took one step toward her. "I want to hear you say it." "You said..." Her voice shook. "You said I made a mistake." "And?" Another step. She took one back. "That you'd make me pay for it." She whimpered. "Good." He took another step. "So you were listening." "But you saved me." She backed up again. "You helped." "I did." Another step. His expression didn't change. "Doesn't mean I've forgotten." She backed into a chair, moved around it. He adjusted his angle. Still coming, faster now. "I don't understand." Her voice cracked. "What did I do? I was desperate. I didn't mean to..." "Didn't you?" Another step. Her back hit the bookshelf. Nowhere left to go. He kept coming until he was a foot away, then another 6 inches. She pressed herself against the shelf. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. "I don't..." She couldn't finish. Couldn't breathe. He took one final step. Now they were barely inches apart. So close she could feel the heat coming off him, could see the tension in his jaw, could smell his cologne mixed with something darker, anger, want, something she couldn't name. "You want to know what you did?" His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Dangerous. Intimate. She nodded. His eyes bored into hers. Dark. Intense. Unreadable. "For 20 years, he said quietly, "I struggled, meditated, suffered my flesh to build something. Control, discipline, walls that nothing, no woman could penetrate." His gaze dropped to her mouth, stayed there. He felt the same heat from the airport spread down once again. "I was safe." His voice went rougher, cold, dead to everything that could hurt me, everything that could be used as weakness. His eyes dragged back up to meet hers. "And then you..." His jaw tightened. "You crashed into my airport, grabbed my face, kissed me like you were drowning." His eyes fell to her lips again. "And you shattered all of it." The words came out raw. 20 years. Gone, because of one desperate kiss from a woman I'd never seen before. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. His eyes stayed on her mouth. "You made me feel again." He said it like an accusation, like a confession. "And I don't know..." His voice caught. "I don't know if I want to punish you for it or..." He stopped, his control visibly fracturing. The air between them was electric, suffocating. His eyes were still on her lips. She watched something break in his expression. "God help me," he breathed. Then his mouth crashed against hers, desperate, hungry, consuming. His hands tangled in her braids, on her waist, yanking her against him. He didn't know when he'd leaned in. didn't know when the decision was made. All he knew was that this, having her, tasting her, claiming her, was all he'd wanted for the past 24 hours. He needed her. The kiss was passionate, possessive, 20 years of denial exploding into raw want. He backed her harder against the bookshelf, his body pinning hers completely, one hand gripping her waist. She pushed him away. Not hard, just enough to break contact. They stood frozen, both breathing like they'd been running, his chest heaving, his eyes black, pupils blown, control shattered. She looked terrified, overwhelmed. But she was staring at his mouth. The silence stretched impossibly long. 1 heartbeat, 2, 3. Then she rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. Her choice. Whatever control he had left snapped. He lifted her. She wrapped her legs around him. He carried her out without breaking the kiss. Hours later, they lay tangled in his sheets. The city glittered beyond the windows. Her head rested on his chest. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Tell me about her," he said quietly. "Your mother." So she did. Lagos, the hospital, the surgery that cost a decade's worth of Nigerian wages, the money she'd been building toward for 2 years, so close, almost enough, before Minho destroyed it all with a forged signature. When she finished, she asked softly, "Why did you really help me today?" He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My father was arrested when I was 12. Officers, 6 of them." His voice was carefully flat. "False charges from men who wanted what he had. He was in custody for 4 years. Her breath stopped. "He killed himself 3 months before his release." He said it simply, like it was just a fact. "They didn't tell me right away, thought I was too young. By the time I found out, he was already gone." She lifted her head. Something in his eyes made her chest ache. "When I saw them grab you today," his jaw tightened, "I was 12 again, powerless, watching someone get taken and not being able to stop it." She kissed him, soft, gentle. He pulled her closer. Before sleep took her, she saw him reach for his phone, watched him open her contact, add 2 words, emergency contact. "You're my wife now," he said simply. "Protocol." She fell asleep against his chest. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe. Light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Kioma woke slowly, reaching across the bed. Cold sheets. Empty. She sat up, heart dropping for a moment before she saw the note on his pillow and grabbed the phone from the nightstand. A text waited. Something urgent came up in the city. Had to leave early. "Last night, getting to know you, talking with you, it was more than I expected. I want to do this properly. Dinner tonight, 7 p.m. I'll pick you up. Check the closet. T.W." She read it twice, then a third time. "I want to do this properly." Her heart did something complicated in her chest. She looked at the empty space beside her, at the sheets that still smelled like his cologne, at the massive bedroom that somehow felt too big without him in it. What was she doing? She'd slept with a man she'd known less than 24 hours, a stranger she'd kissed in desperation at an airport, a dangerous man whose name made immigration officers go pale. She should feel guilty, should feel stupid, should feel something other than this warmth in her chest, this feeling of safety, this wanting to see him again. She got up, wrapped herself in his shirt, it fell to her thighs, smelled like him, and walked to the closet Ms. Shin had shown her. And stopped dead. A dress hung there that probably cost more than everything she owned combined. Golden silk that caught the morning light and turned it liquid. The kind of dress you wore to places that didn't have prices on the menu. Matching heels. Designer, her size exactly. A clutch. Delicate jewelry laid out like an offering on velvet. He'd had someone shop for her. Overnight, while she'd been sleeping in his bed. She touched the fabric, silk whispered against her fingers. Dinner tonight. A proper date. With her husband. With the man who'd told her about his father last night, voice cracking just slightly on the word gone. and she'd seen past all the danger and the threats and the cold authority to the 12-year-old boy who'd lost everything. She pressed her fingers to her lips without thinking. She'd barely known him 24 hours, didn't know his favorite food or his birthday or what he did when he wasn't dismantling immigration cases with 3 phone calls. But she couldn't forget how his hands had grabbed her waist at the airport, instinctive, possessive, like his body had made a decision before his mind caught up, how he'd defended her in front of those officers, made them powerless with nothing but his voice and his name, how he'd looked at her in his study, like he wanted to destroy her and keep her and didn't know which impulse would win, the way he'd whispered, "God help me," right before he'd kissed her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. No one had ever done that for her. No one had ever looked at her like that. Was this just a rebound? Was she just running from Minho's betrayal straight into something else? Something she didn't understand? But she realized she hadn't thought about Minho once since those officers had grabbed her yesterday. Not once. Not even when Taewon had mentioned his name. Taewon had consumed her completely. And last night, when he'd told her about his father, voice raw, eyes distant, something broken and young flickering across his features, her heart had cracked open for him in a way that terrified her. She looked back at the dress, the shoes, the careful way everything had been laid out. One thing was missing. Makeup. Not critical. Not even that important. But it was their first real date. Their first time doing this properly, like he'd said. And they were husband and wife, even if it had started as a desperate lie, even if neither of them knew what they were doing. She wanted to look perfect for him. All her makeup was still at her apartment, the apartment that was probably still sealed with immigration tape. She checked the time. 11 a.m. If she hurried, she could get there and back, grab her things. Her house door was exactly as they'd left it. Yellow tape across the frame, already peeling at the corners. No one had touched it. Kioma slipped inside. The apartment looked ransacked, drawers pulled open from when the officers had searched, her clothes scattered, papers everywhere. She stepped over the mess and found her makeup bag in the bathroom. Foundation. Mascara. The lipstick her mother had given her before she left Lagos, the one good piece she'd brought from home. She was reaching for her eyeliner when the knock came. Sharp, insistent. Wrong. Every instinct she had screamed danger. "Kioma!" The voice made her blood turn to ice. "I know you're in there." Minho. "Open the door. We need to talk." She froze, makeup bag clutched in her hands. Maybe if she stayed quiet, maybe if she didn't move. "I'll break it down." His voice was different, harder. "You know I will." Her hand shook as she walked to the door, unlocked it. Minho stood there. But he wasn't alone. 5 men flanked him, large, expensive suits, dead eyes, the kind of men who got paid to hurt people badly and didn't ask questions. "Hello, Kioma." His smile was poison. "We need to talk about what you've recently done to my life." "I haven't done anything." He shoved past her, hard. She stumbled back. The 5 men followed, filling her small apartment with their presence. One closed the door behind them. The click of the lock was the loudest sound she'd ever heard. "Haven't done anything?" Minho's voice rose. "I've been fired, Kioma. Fired. Do you understand what that means?" "I don't know what you're talking about," she started. "There's an investigation into my entire division, every deal I've ever closed, every contract I've signed." He stepped closer. "My accounts are frozen. My assets are being seized." "And gee woo!" His face twisted with something ugly. "Her father called off the engagement this morning, said he couldn't have his daughter associated with someone under criminal investigation." Fear crawled up her spine. "Minho, I didn't—" "Don't lie to me!" He grabbed her arm, hard enough to bruise. "You went to someone powerful enough to destroy my entire life in 48 hours. Who was it? Who did you fuck to ruin me?" "I didn't," she cried. "My boss called me yesterday." His grip tightened. "Jang Taewon himself. Do you have any idea who that is? What he is?" Her heart stopped. Jang Taewon. His boss. She hadn't known. Hadn't even thought to ask what Taewon did, what companies he owned, who worked for him. "He fired me personally and brought the police with him," Minho continued, something manic in his eyes now. walked into my office like he owned the building, which apparently he does, and told me I was terminated, effective immediately. Said something about, what was it? Employees who forge immigration documents and abuse their authority deserve to understand consequences. His smile was broken. Sound familiar? Min-ho, please. You should have just left quietly. His voice went soft, deadly. When I had you arrested, when I forged those documents, all you had to do was get on that plane, go back to Nigeria, disappear. He released her arm, stepped back. But you couldn't do that, could you? You had to be difficult, had to fight back. He gestured to the 5 men. So now we're going to be difficult too. They moved forward as one. Kiyoma's hand found her phone in her pocket, fumbled for it. Emergency contact. She pressed it blindly as the first man grabbed her. What are you? Min-ho saw the phone, lunged for it. Who are you calling? But she'd already hit it. The line connected for about 7 seconds before one of the men ripped the phone from her hand and crushed it under his heel. Doesn't matter, Min-ho said. By the time anyone finds us, you'll understand exactly what it feels like to lose everything. They dragged her toward the door. She struggled, screamed. No one in the building would help. They never did in Seoul. Everyone minded their business. They shoved her into a van waiting outside. Min-ho climbed in after her. Drive, he told his men. The green warehouse in Incheon. No one goes there anymore. The van pulled away. Kiyoma's last thought before one of them tied her hands was, please let Taewon have heard. Please let him know. Taewon was in a meeting across Seoul. Contract negotiations with a development firm. Numbers on screens. His CFO presenting quarterly projections. His phone buzzed on the table in front of him. He glanced at it. Emergency contact. Kiyoma. His blood turned to ice. He answered immediately. Kiyoma? Sounds of struggle, a crash, her voice, let me go! Then Min-ho's voice, clear, unmistakable. Who are you calling? A crunch, like glass breaking, or a phone being destroyed. The line went dead. Taewon stood so abruptly, his chair crashed backward. Every head in the boardroom turned. His expression must have been something because his CFO went pale. Out, Taewon said quietly. Everyone. Now. They didn't argue, didn't ask questions. They grabbed their things and fled. The door closed. Taewon stood there for 3 seconds, completely still. Then he made one call. Assemble the full team, heavily armed. Now. Put on his jacket. By the time he stepped outside, the line of black vehicles was already waiting. We're paying a former employee a visit. His voice was ice, pure controlled fury. And before this night is over, he's going to learn what happens when you touch what is mine. Min-ho just signed his own death warrant. Because Jang Taewon doesn't make threats, he makes examples. But while he's heading to that warehouse, his enemies are already watching. They know he has a wife now, and in his world, a wife is leverage. Worse, his mother is about to find out, and she does not tolerate weakness. What happens when she learns her son secretly married a foreign woman he met yesterday? What happens when his enemies realize Kiyoma is the only thing that can break him? Part 2 is where the real war begins. Subscribe now if you want to see what happens when Seoul's most dangerous man goes to war for his wife. Like if that last line gave you chills. Comment war if you're ready, and tell me, where are you watching from? Part 2 drops soon. Don't miss it.